Hello everyone, Thunderbob here, and I know I've been gone for a few weeks. I've been dealing with the aftermath of Hurricane Ian. I live in Southwest Florida, and my area was greatly impacted by that storm. And I just want to take a few minutes to talk about my personal experience with the storm and also the impact it's had on my community. I've lived in Florida my entire life for more than 30 years. I've been here for Andrew, Charlie, and Hurricane Irma, and I have to say this storm was on another level. First off, it hit us on September 28th, and in the days leading up to that landfall, it appeared the storm might head further north, hit the Panhandle, and then day by day it came closer and closer to my area. Uh, from the Panhandle to Tampa until the morning of the 28th, I woke up and the cone was literally directly uh, in my city where I live. Now, I'm not going to get into specifics on where that is. I'm just going to say it was right where that cone was going for, and we were hit by 150-mile-an-hour winds, which lasted for at least 6 hours. We started getting the really heavy winds around 2 p.m. on the 28th on Wednesday, and when I went to bed at 11 p.m., we were still getting these frightening gusts of wind. Um, my home was mostly spared from the terrible flooding and the storm surge as we're pretty far inland, but there was some really wild wind and I took some damage. We lost a lot of shingles, probably end up with a new roof when this is all done. One of my windows that was pounded by the strong winds ended up leaking. We had some water come in from the roof damage as well, and not a terrible amount of water, but we'll probably end up having some drywall cut out and replaced. I had this little slit in the storm panels that I could see out of, and I was watching as my daughter's playhouse. I could see it just barely out of the other corner, and at one point I looked out and it was just gone. And it wasn't until the next morning we discovered that that playhouse had been swept away by the wind. This is a 300-pound playhouse that was just thrown like it was a little child's dollhouse. The wind was incredible. At one point, I did lose one of the storm panels on the second floor, and I briefly filmed out of it, watching the wind push this water from the retention pond as if it was a sea. And then I heard all of these popping shingles flying off my roof, and I ran downstairs and I decided it was probably not a good idea to stay upstairs. It was a frightening endeavor, to be honest. I've been through a number of them, and this was just something else. Those 100-mile-an-hour winds went on for something like 10 hours in my area, and my wife and daughter held up pretty well, but I know a bit about construction. I'm in the industry, and like every time I felt our slider on the back of the house kind of buckle inwards a little bit, I'd put my hand on there and try to hold it. And, I'm just imagining if this slider gives way and that wind rushes in, our roof is probably gone. And then halfway through, the wind shifted as the eye moved northwards, and the wind then came from the other side. And our front door, which was just being held closed by a single bolt, I kept hearing it kind of buckle when the wind would gust, and I just kept imagining that door rushing open and then the wind finding, its way upstairs and just ripping our roof off. And we got lucky. Everything held, some minimal damage that insurance should cover, but it was frightening to say the least. After the storm left, the cleanup started. The neighbors all came outside the next day. We helped each other to take down our storm panels, to tarp up our roofs, to chop up the trees that had fallen. In the end, we were without power for 10 days. And when the power finally did turn on is when I found out my air conditioning had died during the power surges that we were getting when the storm was coming through. And it took another 3 days after the 10 days without power to get our AC fixed. During that time, I did have a generator, but the problem was it was impossible to get gas those first couple of days. I'm talking, I woke up at 5 a.m., literally before curfew, driving around, finding gas stations that had gas, and they all had 3-mile long lines. I'm talking about people sleeping in their cars, waiting for these stations to open. Um, so by the time I got gas, we lost everything in our fridge and our freezer. Today was actually the first thunderstorms that we've experienced since Ian left, and it left me really anxious and terrified. Our roof is tarped, and if it, got ripped apart, or if the water found its way, under it, we might have some bad flooding. And I just, every time that wind gusted, every time I could hear the thunder and the lightning, it was kind of like a little PTSD flashback. Um, every time the power went on and off, it's kind of horrible to go through something like that, and then another storm comes through before you've even repaired the damage. Luckily, we didn't sustain any further damage, and actually, I had our insurance adjuster out today, and we've probably got like $30,000 to $50,000 worth of damage. But luckily, we've got pretty good insurance that should cover pretty much everything. We got a deductible off to pay, but that's what living in Florida is like. We were far enough inland to avoid the really terrible storm surge that some areas had. There were some areas where literally people lost everything. There are areas where people lost their lives. I'm pretty sure this is going to be one of the deadliest storms in Florida's history after they've completed all of the searches of Fort Myers Beach and Sanibel and all these coastal areas. I wanted to spend a couple of minutes showing some footage that I've captured and others have captured, just showing some of the really worst devastated areas, just to give you some ideas of how bad it got. This is downtown Fort Myers. This is a place that I walk a couple of times a week. I eat lunch down here a lot and walk this downtown area frequently, and it got probably 5-6 foot of storm surge that came in a couple 100 feet. And these areas all got really, really devastated by the storm waters. I know the person who filmed this, actually. I meet with them pretty regularly in my job. And I have friends who stayed downtown during the storm in some of those high rises you can see in the background. And literally, they indicated that their building was like part of the Caloosahatchee River. It was, just an intense, intense amount of water that came into the city. Here's another view of Fort Myers. Again, areas that I, visit pretty frequently. And these boats literally came into the downtown area. And I'll show you some footage that I took coming up next. It shows you all those buildings being gutted and all of the things that were inside just thrown out on the sidewalk. And here you can see the storm surge just pushed all of these huge boats and yachts just right onto the land. I mean, these are, 30, 40, 50-foot yachts, these $1 million boats that are going to take cranes to get them back into the water, and, who knows if they're going to be salvageable. And just incredible, the force of the water. I found this really interesting NOAA imagery that has post-Ian aerial photography. I just wanted to show a couple of things and talk over it. First off is that Fort Myers area that I was just showing you with the boats. This is actually what it looks like from the air. I was standing right about here, filming like kind of this direction and then walking this way. And you can just see, all these boats. They were out here, actually. There was a marina right here. And all those boats, for the most part, went onto the land. This is Joe's Crab Shack over here. This is Centennial Park. And these things over here, these are like giant piers that were attached to the dock out here. Like, these things have to weigh, 1,000 pounds apiece. And were just tossed 50 feet from the shoreline. And this is that bridge that they were filming from down to downtown Fort Myers. And this is the hotel right here that they were filming. That surging water, that 3 to 5 feet of water just flowing right through here. And we got, I think 5-6 feet. Pretty much all of these buildings, sustained some damage. Everything at the waterfront here. They're as you saw in that video, they're cutting out the drywall. They're throwing out all the desks and the tables and everything that was in that first floor and just throwing them onto Main Street. And they're getting picked up. It's cleaned up now, but on a daily basis, they're still gutting a lot of these buildings, and it's going to be that way for the foreseeable future. Another area I wanted to show was Fort Myers Beach. I had a really good video that I was going to share, but it got copyright striked, even though I think it was fair use, but I'm not going to argue. But I feel like this is just a, an example of the worst of the storm surge. I was lucky that I'm pretty far inland, but Fort Myers Beach, I just read today, they're approximating had 15-foot of storm surge. If you think about that, that's to the top of a second floor residential home, or nearly. And I was listening to the radio um, after my power went out on Wednesday, and I can remember there was this family that was on Fort Myers Beach, and they called in, and they had already climbed to the second story of their home, and were climbing into the attic and saying like the water's rushing in, and the news lady was, kind of hysterical almost, saying like, make sure there's some way you can get out of there. Make sure you can break a window. And he said, well, they're impact windows. I can't break them. Well, make sure you can get some way to get through the ceiling. And like before you could respond, the phone died. And for the next couple of days into the weekend, I kept thinking like, did that family just die? And it turns out that they did manage to escape, or I think the water had stopped just before the top of the attic was reached. But there were a lot of families that were not lucky. I've read there's been, I think, a dozen or so that died on Fort Myers Beach, and a lot of those, I'm sure, were people that were getting trapped in their homes. You can see this is not normally sand. This is roads normally, and it was just all completely washed away. If you zoom in here, look at the debris field. It's just incredible the amount of damage. Fort Myers Beach is going to take years to recover from this. I've been to a lot of these places. I've been to this beach. I've been to these restaurants. I know people that have lived out here. I took my daughter out to Bowditch Point Park on her first birthday. We did a photo shoot out there. Like, I know these places pretty intimately, and it's just terrible what's happened. It makes me really, really sad to see the crazy, damage that it sustained and the loss of life. And moving just a little further south, we got Fort Myers Beach. Moving into Bonita, the damage here was pretty intense as well. I'm kind of just showing a couple of the places that I have visited and places that I've seen that sustain a lot of damage and have some meaning to me. And there is a retro video game store. I know it's kind of a silly thing, but I'd make twice yearly I'd come down to this video game store. I think it's in this plaza, if I remember correctly. And I saw a video, and basically the water was to the top of this plaza. I'll see if I can add it in here. Literally as high as it would go. Like, you can barely see the buildings anymore. And I saw pictures, and I'll see if I can include that here as well, showing the aftermath. Literally, the entire store is just gone. Millions of dollars worth of old, vintage games and systems and consoles just destroyed. And it's, it's nothing compared to the loss of life, but it's a place that meant a lot to me, and I enjoyed visiting, and it's just gone and, maybe never come back. But just to show you, like, the scale of the destruction that this area sustained, beaches completely destroyed, from the storm surge and the crazy wind, ripping roofs off all over the place. And it's just horrifying, and it's going to be a long time for some of these communities to recover. I am a certified floodplain manager, and in my normal day-to-day job, I speak with a whole lot of people who are inquiring about, their flood zone, how they can improve their situation. And since the storm, I've talked with a number of people who have sustained really substantial damages or completely lost everything. And the scary thing is that this area is getting new flood maps on November 17th. And even if you built to those new standards, many of these coastal areas would still be underwater. And it's been barely 5 years since Irma, and it's frightening to think that these storms, these incredible storms, might be becoming more common, as the Gulf waters heat up. as climate change continues to impact, the water levels and the storm surge levels. Um, it's definitely worrying, and I think it's going to impact this area for years to come. It's going to take years for some of these areas to recover, and many of the homes and businesses are simply going to be unsalvageable. If you do know anyone in the area, I would strongly suggest reach out to them. See if they need any help, offer a kind word. If you're in a position to be able to offer help, do so. There are people out there that have literally lost everything they own. They've lost family members, their home, their belongings. Um, there are a lot of organizations out there also that you can contribute to, donate money, clothes, food, your time if you're in the area. And I would strongly suggest you do so if you're able to. And myself, I've taken some damage, but I'm not asking for any assistance. I've got insurance. I've got a lot of savings. I'm going to make it through this, but there are people out there that do need that help. And I see them on a daily basis, and I do what I can. But I'm one person. If there's anyone that you can help, do so. Be a good person. And I do want to say that I will be getting back to my normal videos in the near future. I just felt like this was something important I wanted to talk about, share what happened in my area. I feel like everyone thinks the storm's just over, and there are a ton of places that it's going to be years to recover. So just think about it. If you can help in any way, please do so. And I want to thank everyone who watches. I do appreciate you, and have a good night. There's one last thing I wanted to share. There's been this memorial that people have been building here where I work, and you can see here the names of people that have been lost in the storm, pictures, photos, flowers, little stuffed animals, things like that, candles. And I just thought this was kind of beautiful and meaningful. And there's messages on here about, we're going to rebuild and recover. And when I saw this, I thought it was a really meaningful and a good way to end this, showing kind of the strength of the local people and, how they're coming together. So ended on this somber note. Thanks for watching again.